Well, good afternoon, SLAE family. So thrilled to bring this special guest here today. This woman is a bundle of energy, that is for sure. Today, we are going to wrap up our awesome series about taking care of ourselves, which is so appropriate for Women's History Month. And as you know, we talked a little bit about fitness, and then we talked a little bit about pampering in the most natural way with organic and no chemical things last week. And now we are going to talk about taking care of yourself and what you can do for your long-term health, because that is so critical for all of us. And today our discussion will be a little bit about avoiding heart disease, Alzheimer's, and some of the things that all of us want to avoid long-term. But we are going to do it the brilliant way. And that's why we have Barb Minnemeyer here today, because she's going to show us how to do these things holistically. And she's just got a phenomenal company that really teaches people about chemicals and to avoid, et cetera. So to start off, I will introduce you today. Barb, thank you for being here. Really excited. She is a holistic wellness coach. Can you take a minute and just tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive into our conversation today?
Sure, yeah. Well, my focus as a nutrition coach is to count the chemicals, not the calories. You know, a lot of people, spend their time counting the calories, but they're not looking at the ingredients. Ingredients matter. And in there lie the culprits, as I say. So, yes. Yeah.
And I know you've been very successful with your business, but today we're going to really focus on how it all ties in with heart disease and Alzheimer's, which are things that women are very susceptible to. Maybe you want to take a minute and share some stats on all that.
Absolutely. I mean, just recently it was on the news that heart disease is the #1 killer of women. And I thought to myself, well, why is that? Why is that? So I kind of got into the weeds here and got some stats that I'd like to share with you, if that's okay.
Please do, yes.
And it says that it is well documented that high blood pressure, obesity, and high cholesterol are major risk factors for heart disease, but they are risks that women have more than men. They are diabetes is a higher risk for women, premature menopause, which I'm going to get to in just a minute, smoking, metabolic syndrome, which is a combination of your abdominal fat, your triglycerides, and your blood sugar, and high blood pressure, and then also depression. Okay, these are things that affect women more than men. But now I wanted to share with you for the premature menopause for women. I just found that I didn't know this. This I learned today, just prepping for this, that Black women were 3 times more likely than white women to experience premature menopause. Okay. And they are at a 40% higher risk of developing coronary heart disease as a result of premature menopause. Okay. This held true even after adjusting for known cardiovascular disease risk factors such as smoking, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. And it doesn't matter whether you took hormones or not during the course of your life. That's not even in the equation. They say that has nothing to do with it. So these results indicate premature menopause is associated with higher lifetime risk of coronary heart disease. To mitigate this risk, clinicians need to start asking women about their menopause status earlier. In other words, if you're seeing a doctor, they should ask you this information, and you should tell them if they don't, because then they can start a treatment earlier to help you. If a woman experiences menopause before the age of 40, she should let her doctor know so they can be more proactive about optimizing her care. And that's pretty much on the premature menopause. But I have a couple other stats here for you. Okay. Among females 20 years and older, nearly 45% are living with some form of cardiovascular disease, and less than 50% of women entering pregnancy in the United States have good heart health. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer of new moms and accounts for over 1/3 of maternal deaths. Black women have some of the highest maternal mortality rates. And I remember hearing that the stats for women giving birth in the hospitals, that Black women were dying while giving birth more so than white women.
Do you know why that is? Is there something that they can credit that to?
Well, I think this is what I'm learning here now. I mean, that they have overall a higher susceptibility to cardiovascular disease than white women. Going through menopause does not cause cardiovascular disease, but the approach of menopause marks a point in midlife when women's cardiovascular risk factors can accelerate. Making increased focus on health during this pivotal life stage is crucial. And that's pretty much it for that. So yeah, I mean, who
So
knew?
before we tackle the Alzheimer's conversation too, because we're going to have both today, okay, someone's watching this, whether they are, someone who's got the early premenopause or they're just a regular, standard paced woman when it comes
Right.
to all that stuff. What are
Right.
things that people can do? And this is all holistic, which we love. So
Okay.
what are things that I could do or not eat, or something that I can do? What are the options I have that you would recommend if it's a woman watching this and she goes, well, I don't want that to happen to me?
Well, I mean, I would want to lower my sugar intake big time, number one, because sugar is our number one toxin, and it's at the root of all disease is sugar. Okay. And as a matter of fact, back in the 80s, when they talked about cutting down your fats because it was causing heart disease and so on and so forth, well, they found that it wasn't the fat that was causing it, it was the sugar that was raising our cholesterol. So then what they did, whenever they had a low fat, no fat product like yogurts, they'd strip the fat out, but they would add sugar in. And that's when all of this really began. Okay. So you
Interesting.
want to lower your sugar intake. You want to eat less carbs, less grains like wheat, barley, spelt, things of that nature. Because when you're eating too much of it, it gets stored in your body as fat because you can't burn it up as quickly.
Okay, so hold on, I'm going to stop you because I want to learn from you today while everybody else is learning, I'm going to learn them too. Okay, so when you say the sugar, obviously that is, everybody knows it's bad. Just how bad it is sounds like you might think it's, or know it's even worse than we know. When you talk about grains, there are some things that we all put in a box when it comes to grains. So you mentioned wheat, for example, but what about, quinoa, brown rice? Are those things bad? Or
quinoa
those
is good. Quinoa, brown rice, wild rice, jasmine rice, all those are good. Buckwheat, amaranth, they're all gluten-free.
Okay, gluten-free.
Yes, gluten-free. There's nothing really redeeming at all about gluten. Okay, there is no real benefit to it. They're finding that it's doing more harm than good to people's health, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So yes, yeah, gluten is really it's wreaking havoc on people.
So gluten occurs in wheat, but it wouldn't occur, for example, in that other list of grains you just went through.
Yeah, the quinoa, no, that's gluten-free. Gluten, yeah, quinoa, buckwheat, amaranth, teff, things of that nature are gluten-free.
So those are in the okay pile, and then there's the the not so okay pile.
Then there's the wheat, the barley, the spelt, and I'm leaving one out.
So what, just generally, I would assume bread is going to be loaded with that unless you're buying a special gluten-free option.
Well, even pasta, bread, really cereals, which are the number one offenders. They not only are they, wheat and glutinous, most of them, but they have chemicals in them, all different additives that really are not good for us either.
Now, as you know, I'm married to an Italian, so I'm asking on behalf of all pasta lovers out there. If you wanted to do pasta, but you want to stay away from that, I've seen alternatives in the market: lentil pastas, chickpea pastas, black bean pastas. Are those culprits too, or are they clean and they're okay?
No, they're not culprits, but I always tell people, always read the ingredient label, what it contains, always. And I know if you're looking at wheat, because I learned this a couple months ago, wheat, oats, chickpeas, and mung beans I found are sprayed with glyphosate, which is a pesticide, at the
Really?
time of harvest to dry them out. So everything you buy, really, our bottom line should be organic. Everything that we buy, because it used to have a label on it, non-GMO verified, if it hadn't been genetically modified, and
Yes.
then you knew it hadn't been sprayed. But now to find out that some of these crops are being sprayed at the time of harvest, it doesn't matter if the seed was genetically modified or not. It's now got pesticide residue on it, and you don't want to ingest that.
And you're trying to eat a little chickpea, and that's what's going on. So,
Yeah, so your hummus, really, hummus should be organic.
wow. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
those are some things that you would want to stay away from. Are there things that you would say, holistic, easy things that you can do that you should incorporate into your diet
Oh,
if you're trying to stave
absolutely.
it off?
I
Mhm.
mean, ideally, it's better to have low sugar intake, low carbs, more plant-based foods in your diet. Okay. I'm a meat eater. I do eat meat, but I buy only grass-fed.
Mhm.
Okay. And or wild caught fish, fruits and vegetables, organic if possible, if you can. Um, yeah, like the whole thing is like, if you're gonna have a meal, you're gonna make some chicken, right? So you have the chicken, you make your vegetables. Like it's like not everything is glommed with a sauce or cheese all over it or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
individual whole foods. You put on your plate, your protein, your vegetables. I usually have two on my plate. I don't eat a lot of grains hardly anymore, ever since I read the book we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
Um, and that's pretty much it. And keep your sugar intake at a low, definitely. I mean, the reality is that the statistics are now that each individual is consuming 170 pounds of sugar a year.
Are
If
you
you're
serious?
if you're a processed food eater, all the cereals, anything in a bag, in a box, everything has sugar in it. Even when you go out to eat, there's sugar in your salad dressing, sugar in your gravies. It's mind-blowing. It really is.
So if you're going to the store and you don't know what to do, if it's in the produce section or if it's some kind of clean protein or if it's in a bag or a box, that's going to be a big distinction right there.
The bag in the box. I mean, what people should start to do, and I always encourage people to do this, when you go to the supermarket next time, pick up a cereal box or pick up some Thomas's English muffins or bread, loaves of bread, and read the ingredient label, not the nutrition label, the ingredient label. What an education you'll get. You'll see all the sugar in there. Natural flavors is another big one. And really get to see what's in the food that you just grab without even thinking, right?
Yeah. And they never have to put an ingredient label on green beans or broccoli. So
Yeah, we need to eat the food without the ingredient list. Good point, Leanne. Thanks. Thanks for that.
if then you don't have to do all that work, if it's got a list on it, maybe just don't eat it.
Really? Yeah, and you know what? And you'll feel so much better for it. You
Yes.
know, bottom line, we have to be our own best advocates, because I have to tell you, the food companies are not going to do it for us. Our FDA gives them the loopholes they need to get away with all that they get away with. And so we really need to educate ourselves. What I like to say before I forget, on my website, if you go to yourhealthytruth.com, I have a giveaway as soon as you get on there, and it's my valuable resources, all the resources that I go to keep abreast of what's going on with our food, what we have to look out for, the GMOs. So it's a great list. And if people want to learn more, I encourage them to download it.
Thank you for doing all that work and making it accessible for free. That's fabulous.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, one of the other things that we really wanted to cover today when you and I were chatting is Alzheimer's, because
Yes.
almost everybody I know, like we've had people with dementia in my family, but if you haven't had it in your family, one of your friends does. Like it's so common now. And, that is, I think, a fear for a lot of people. I mean, so many times people talk about getting older and do not resuscitate and medical directives, but there's this whole piece of we're watching people really battle with dementia and they're still alive, but they're just not the same human being anymore. So what do you have to say about that? If I am, not a medical person, I'm a regular person, I'm a mom, I work, I do all these things. What can I do that's simple that will help me with avoiding that? Or you said even some maybe ways to reverse some of it.
Right. There is. Yes, absolutely. So do you remember the stat that I had put up, I think, in your group a while back that came from Blue Cross and Blue Shield, that between the years of 2013 and 2017, Alzheimer's had increased of 407% within the ages of 30 and 45-year-olds. 30 and 45-year-olds, 49 being the average age. That is stunning. Okay.
It's
and
shocking.
the one thing that we know it's coming from is our food. When you have an increase in disease, like we're seeing all over the map, across the board, okay, Parkinson's, ALS, this, that, it all begins with our food. Food is at the root of all disease, whether it's what's inflaming you or healing you. Okay, food is the root cause and the healing of it. But I wanted to share with you, I love to share stories. There's no better way to make an impact and get a point across than to share stories. When I give talks on my own, I share my client stories. This time I want to share a story from Dr. Perlmutter through this book, Grain Brain, so that you can see, because the belief is that the grains, the glutinous grains, are having a really big impact on Alzheimer's. It's creating kind of a plaque in our brain, okay, and our brain is shrinking as a result of it. I mean, it's pretty amazing. But I wanted to read just a couple of stories here to kind of get my point across. Is that okay?
Oh, yes, please.
Perfect. Okay, so this is Dr. Perlmutter talking. Another woman who came to me with a totally different set of symptoms, but a similarly long history of suffering, was Lauren. At just 30 years old, she told me squarely on our first meeting that she was having some mental problems. Lauren detailed the previous 12 years, which she described as a consistent downhill ride in terms of health. She told me how her early life was quite stressful. Once she lost both her mother and her grandmother at a young age. When she started college, she had been hospitalized on several occasions for mania. During this time, she would experience episodes of becoming highly talkative and overly grandiose about herself. She would then eat excessively, gain a lot of weight, and become severely depressed and suicidal. She had just started taking lithium, a medication used to treat bipolar disorder. Mental illness ran in her family. Her sister had schizophrenia and her father was bipolar. Aside from Lauren's dramatic account of her mental issues, the rest of her medical history was fairly unremarkable. She had no laments of bowel issues, food allergies, or any other of the standard types of complaints associated with gluten sensitivity. I went ahead in order to test for gluten sensitivity. We found profoundly elevated levels of 6 important markers for the condition. In fact, several of these markers were more than twice the normal range. 2 months after starting a gluten-free diet, Lauren wrote a letter to me that echoed what I've been hearing from so many patients who've gone gluten-free and experienced striking results. She stated, "Since being off gluten, my life has taken a complete 180. The first change that comes to mind, and the most important one, is my mood. When I was eating gluten, I would struggle with feeling depressed. I would always have to fight a dark cloud over my head. Now that I'm off gluten, I don't feel depressed. The one time I ate some by mistake, I felt depressed again. And the next day, and the next day. Other changes I've noticed include having more energy and being able to stay focused for longer periods. My thoughts are as sharp as ever. I can make a decision and come to a logical, confident conclusion like never before. I am also free of a lot of obsessive compulsive behavior. Now, there may be some people out there today that can relate to what this woman was experiencing, right? Um, can I do another one?
Sure. Yes, please. Mhm.
Okay, because this one is really mind-boggling. Let me give you one more example of a case that's emblematic of another set of symptoms linked to the same culprit. Kurt and his mother came to see me when he was 23 years old, a young man suffering from abnormal movements. His mother stated that 6 months prior to their visit, he began looking like he was shivering. Initially, his tremors were subtle, but then they increased with time. He had been to 2 neurologists and received 2 different diagnoses, one for what's called essential tremor and another for dystonia. The doctors had offered him a blood pressure medication, uh, propranolol, which is used to treat some types of tremor disorders. The other recommendation was to have the various muscles in his arms and neck injected with Botox, the botulinum toxin that would temporarily paralyze the spastic muscles. Both he and his mother had elected not to use either the pills or the injections. What was interesting about his history were 2 things. First, he was diagnosed as having a learning disability in the 4th grade. His mother said that he could not handle excessive stimulation. And second, for several years, he had complaints of stomach pain with loose bowel movements to the extent that he had to see a gastroenterologist who took a biopsy of his small intestine to test for celiac disease. It proved negative. When I examined Kurt, his excessive movement problem was very evident. He could not control the shaking of his arms and neck and appeared to be suffering mightily. I reviewed his laboratory studies, which for the most part were unrevealing. He had been checked for Huntington's disease, an inherited disorder known to cause a similar movement abnormality in young people, as well as Wilson's disease, a disorder of copper metabolism also associated with a movement abnormality. All of these tests were negative. Blood work for gluten sensitivity did, however, show some elevated levels of certain antibodies indicative of vulnerability. I explained to Kurt and his mother that it was important to make sure gluten sensitivity wasn't the cause of his movement disorder. And I provided them information on how to pursue a gluten-free diet. After several weeks, I received a phone call from Kurt's mother, indicating that without question, his movements had calmed down. Because of his improvement, he elected to stay on a gluten-free diet. And after approximately 6 months, the abnormal movements had all but disappeared completely. The changes that occurred in this young man are breathtaking, especially when you consider that a simple dietary change had such a life-transforming impact.
That's incredible.
I mean, really, I could like stand up and do a dance because it's just, and you know, in my work, and I see it all the time, people are suffering needlessly because they're not getting the proper information that's needed. They're being misdiagnosed. And yeah, and it's a problem.
Well, and it's horrifying what our kids are fed at school too.
Oh.
So we're shoving all that into kids, and then that's what their taste buds want. That's what they're used to eating. I mean, I try and eat really healthy at home, and then my son goes to school, and I'm like, you know, it's nothing I would give him in our house. We'll just leave it at that. So,
but before you move on, just 1 second. This
yeah.
book, I mean, I wanted to make an impact in terms of gluten because gluten is also attributed to the Alzheimer's. There's cytokines and amalgam. I can't remember the scientific names because they're long, but there's things that are impacted by gluten in the brain. Okay. Like you could be impacted in the brain by gluten without having a digestive issue. I mean, could you imagine? You would always think it would be in your gut first, right? Yeah. But studies are showing that it can impact your brain with dementia, so, you know, things of that nature. People that have brain fog, how many people do you talk to that have brain fog? That comes through the food that we eat. But, you know, you can have that impacting your brain without even feeling it in your gut. So, I mean, it's just, yeah, gluten is,
So gluten is the devil when it comes to dementia for sure. And then do
yeah,
you attribute sugar to a lot of the same problems?
yes,
So
yes,
how do you tie that
absolutely.
in as well? You think that that contributes to dementia and Alzheimer's too?
Well, yeah, well, Dr. Perlmutter says anything white, sugar, white flour, all of these things, you know, all the grains, you know, that we went over in the beginning, all have an impact on Alzheimer's for sure.
So stay away from gluten, stay away from sugars, and then stay away from the bad grains. I'm going to call them the bad grains, you know.
Yes, yes, yes,
And
absolutely.
then what are some things that you mentioned, more fruit, more vegetables? Is there anything else that particularly is heart healthy or Alzheimer prevention friendly that you'd want to throw in the mix, or just have
Um,
it?
well, dark leafy greens are really like number one on the list in terms of, you know, heart health. Yeah, the dark leafy greens, they help to thin your blood. You know, they're really, yeah, they're good for your respiratory. I mean, they are the most nutrient dense plants on the planet, are the dark leafy greens. So those definitely. And you know, while I mean, I eat wild caught fish, like I said before. I eat grass fed beef. I won't eat regular beef because what people need to remember is, you know, these poor cows are tied up in a factory farm and they're fed genetically modified corn meal. And they're supposed to be grazing in the pasture and eating grass, right? So
Yes.
what happens is they're eating that grain, then they get sick, then they are given antibiotics, and not to mention the hormones because they want to be milking them all the time. They want to squeeze them for everything they can, no pun intended. But and when that's happening to the animal, what they eat, we're eating.
Yeah.
So when you ingest that, I mean, do you ever think about how the young girls of today, 7 and 8 years old, are developing breasts already
Yeah.
because of all the hormones in our food? You know, it's there's so much to know and to learn, really, to lead a healthy lifestyle that isn't really talked about much.
So I do want to ask you one more question because you also have talked a lot about, you know, the danger of chemicals. So I see people who are like, well, I'm not going to have sugar. And then they get bored drinking water. And there are all kinds of things on the market. And some of them have sucralose and some of them have stevia. And, you know, is it all bad? Is there a lesser of evils? If you're just one of those people who's like, you know what, I got to have something other than water. Should people drink juice? Should people drink diet soda? Should they drink things like, I know there's those buy drinks. There's all kinds of things on the market. What's
You
the
know,
lowdown here, Barb? Hook us up.
well, let me tell you, because I am in pursuit myself of something, because, you know, I drink mainly water or herbal teas. Okay. And I like my coffee in the morning and later in the day. Um, but whenever a new one comes out, I check it out, I read the ingredient label. And it's always, I see natural flavors. Natural flavors are like, we found out as many as 100 different chemicals hide behind natural flavors.
Really?
Okay. So when you're drinking this drink, I mean, I once learned that the raspberry flavoring comes from the butt of a beaver. Did you ever hear that before?
What?
Yes, yes, yes. Check it out. You can Google it. So, you know, I mean, you don't know, I don't know, natural flavor, but that would be natural. But the natural flavors they have in the ingredient list on things, I haven't really found one that I would endorse. I tell my clients, drink water. You can put citrus in it. You can put cucumber in it. You can even get those things where you can put like berries in the bottom and it
Yeah.
infuses up into the water. You know, do that. But when you're buying these waters that their claim to fame is all of this, you know, natural flavoring. Anytime you see the word flavoring, think about it. Flavoring. What does that mean? Flavor. It's flavored
Yeah.
with what?
If it
Yeah.
was actually the real thing, it would probably just say,
It would say the fruit. It would have the fruit listed. It
yeah, I
would
never
say,
thought of before.
Oh, yeah, or I'll see things that have chicken flavoring. I'm like, oh, yeah, that was mixed in the lab, you know? So, no, really, you have to have almost a PhD today to really be able to decipher what's going on.
It's incredible the amount of vagueness that is allowed. You know what I mean? What the heck is that? So sugar's bad. Sucralose, stevia, are they just as bad too in different ways?
Well, I mean, stevia, the stevia you should use is the green powder. The white powder's been bleached. You know, there's a green liquid and a green powder. I don't like stevia. It's got an aftertaste like an artificial sweetener to me.
Mhm.
I can't. I've done protein powders with that in it, and it has an aftertaste that I can't get with.
Doesn't
Um,
work for you.
but you know, everything like little bits. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Also, monk fruit is another one. My doctor keeps telling me to use monk fruit if you need to sweeten things. I personally recommend to my clients, like, don't feel that you have to sweeten everything, you know, because our buds have been programmed
Yes.
since we were like yay big that everything is sweetened and everything has sugar in it. So that when you clear your palate of that, it's easier. Like when I have a cereal, I don't have cereal, when I have like quinoa with berries in it, you know, there was a time when I would put a little maple syrup in it. I don't do that anymore. I just let the berries be my sweetener, you
Yeah,
know?
well, bananas and berries, that stuff can be pretty sweet. I
Yeah, with
actually,
fruit.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then somebody I had it recently was got a smoothie recipe and they put some dates in it. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh, that's
that's good.
probably, yeah, that's not too bad.
That's
So
okay.
before we wrap up, since you are the queen of no chemicals, I would also like to just take a second and have people know that you do offer services for people if they want to clean up their eating habits, and you've got
Oh,
cleansing things. Would
yes.
you
Yeah.
mind just sharing that and maybe giving your website out one more time too?
Sure.
So if
Yeah. I
somebody's
run
going, okay, this is overwhelming, where do I start? They can come
No,
into your world and learn from you.
I understand. Well, I run 3 detox groups a year. We just finished one in February. My next one will be beginning of June. And
Mhm.
then I'll do one probably end of September, beginning of October. So I do that 3 times a year. And then as a result of people saying to me, well, now that I feel so squeaky clean and so good, now what? So now I've started a post detox 6-month group
Oh,
for
wow.
people because they need the support. For people that want to make that lifestyle change, it's perfect. Some
Sure.
people come into the detox, they just want to drop a quick 6, 8 pounds and they're gone. Okay.
Mhm.
I also do one-on-one work with clients. I do a 3-month program and a 6-month program. And I also do, prior to COVID, I take people on healthy trips to Italy, and we go to the organic farms, we make cheese, we go to the vineyards, and we do all kinds of fun stuff.
Wonderful.
Yes.
And your detox program that you said the next one's in June, how long do they run and what does that
They're 2
involve?
weeks, 2
2
weeks.
weeks.
I
And
mean, on my website, if they were to go onto my website, I still have my sales page from my last detox, which happened to be a 3-week detox. But you can read pretty much in there what it entails.
perfect.
If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me.
And your site again is yourhealthytruth.com.
Yourhealthytruth.com.
Well, thank you so
Absolutely.
much for being here. And if you are watching this live on Facebook, then you can leave some comments. Barb's in the Facebook group and she will check them out and comment back with you. And then again, in about a week or so, this will pop up. We now have a YouTube channel, so you can watch it on YouTube or share it with someone else you think would benefit from it and leave comments for her there as well. So thank you again, Barb. I'm going to go drink some water and eat some kale.
That's a beautiful thing.
But look, you know what? It's so funny because, people work so hard and they work on their finances and they, are trying to spend time with their kids. But if at the end of the day, you get your time and you get your money managed, but your health doesn't work, then what's it all for? Without your health.
Exactly. You want to make sure you're around for your kids, your grandkids.
Yes.
And
you want to know who they are and you want to have everything firing in here too. So
exactly.
yep. Well, you're just inspiring and informative. So thank you again for being here, everyone. Please leave any comments, questions, etc. for Barb, and check out her website, because now we know there's free stuff you can download on there, yourhealthytruth.com. And we will be back live next week. We'll see you on Tuesday, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.